DJ LeRoy.
NightWatchman, how you doing, buddy?
Well, how are you?
Good, good. And so, NightWatchman, I know that trees, flowers, they need the rain, but man, this is a lot of rain, buddy.
Mm-hmm.
Is
Yes.
it ever going to stop, or are we going to become Florida? What's going on here, man?
Well. Look, as long as we don't come Florida politically, I'll deal with the rain.
Well. One of the things, though, NightWatchman, as you do know, is that here in New York City, but apparently it seems to be a worldwide thing. Airbnb,
Mm-hmm.
short stay rentals. This legislation, because a lot of Airbnb folk, and we'll actually hear from some dudes who are actually in that space.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be going after the small guy, the small real estate person who's just really trying to make ends meet here. So
Mm-hmm.
you know what? What do you think about that, man?
Well, I think let's hear from the people who are in the space and see how it's going. I mean, we know that Airbnb creates opportunities for people who have space. There's been some talk about its effect on the housing stock in New York because large landlords can take advantage of it. But so I think we need to kind of delve into, as you said, those differentiations between the large ones and the small ones, because they are entirely different entities, especially in New York.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well,
Yep.
you know what, a Night Watchman, why don't we bring up a guy who's been at Soul Lounge Primetime before, and this was when we were talking all things political, and that could only be Aubrey Eric Smith. Bring him up, or Bree,
All
as
right.
we know.
All right.
Bree!
Welcome back.
Thank you for having me, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. So you know what? As a matter of fact, because you have such an extensive network, I asked you to load up this particular space. And I know that you brought one guest, but the other guest apparently had an accident at their space.
It's raining. It's flooding her basement.
Wow.
Her one of the many things that homeowners have to deal with in New York, the elements.
Yes,
and she had an emergency because we've had rain like cats and dogs for days now.
Exactly.
The struggle is real. Yeah.
well, you know what, Night Watchman? We have, that's right. We have two Aubreys. Aubrey Hurse. Aubrey, what's up, buddy?
Hey, how are you today?
Good, man. So, and needless to say, a Night Watchman, we love him already. Even though, Aubrey Eric Smith, not Wakanda, but BX all day, baby. But Aubrey Hurse, that's right. But Aubrey Hurse, yeah, that's right. We got Harlem in the house. Harlem in the house. So, gentlemen, you know what? Please start us off, Aubrey Eric Smith, by telling us, man, what's this all about? Tell me about this legislation.
What this is all about is about Local Law 18. Local Law 18 is a specific law to New York City that went into effect January of 2023. There was a lawsuit in which to combat this by the platform Airbnb, and many hosts in particular were hoping that the lawsuit would get this local law stopped, or at least carved out for 1 and 2 family owners. Local Law 18 with the New York Supreme Court was upheld. And that was something that happened in late July, early August. And at that point, you have to now get registered with the city. You can only have 2 guests in your space, and you must live in the space that you rent out. If you don't do this, you have to do it for 30 days.
Wow.
And also, when you're doing this, you cannot have any locks on internal doors, et cetera, et cetera. There's some rules there that make it tough. But the point that you actually have to abide by all these different rules, there was a tremendous amount of individuals that were doing this in their financial ecosystem, the floor, as you will, for a short-term rental, that now can no longer do it for many different reasons. And we're at a point now where, as of September 5th, most of us that are doing it legally and have applied to the city have not been approved for our new rental certificates license to do this. So now we've been kicked off of the platforms because we don't have a license, and we don't have a license because the city is backlogged to some tune of about 10,000 applications. There's only been about 400 actually done as of yesterday.
Incredible. That's a hell of a backlog. And you know what? I have to ask. So you mentioned while we were off camera about RHOAR. Please tell me what that acronym stands for.
Restoring homeowners' autonomy and respect is a organization is birthed out of this particular local law 18 and its draconian measures. This organization covers 1 and 2 family homeowners who are the little guy and little girl. These individuals came together just out of the need to survive, and has grown into an organization with several hundred members now. We meet on a daily basis via social media and WhatsApp, and we've marched to City Hall. We've met with the mayor. We are constantly trying to meet with different city councils. In saying this, and I don't want to monopolize this conversation, but in saying this, there is a taint about small homeowners.
Gotcha.
We are being vilified as greedy, as opportunistic, and as taking away from the housing stock of the city. And the city is a blue city, a progressive city. And the bona fides for the progressive politicians are that they are anti-AirBNB short-term rentals.
Gotcha.
And there have been bad actors in this space, mostly people who are renting multiple units and gouging and going against the state law, which doesn't allow that sort of thing. And the platforms have not done the best they could do to police it. So now we're here where they now are using a broad brush to correct this space. And we, the ones that have done it legally, the ones that really are doing it out of the goodness of our heart, out of the abilities that we've been able to attain through purchasing our home, through hard work, we are now being brushed just as broadly as those bad actors.
Well, you know what? I guess one of the things I got to say then, Aubrey, obviously, I'm sorry. You know what? I'm going to Night Watchman. I'm going to have to differentiate. AHAS. What should I do?
Bree Smith.
Why didn't you just call Bree and Aubrey? It seems very pretty evident.
Problem solved.
Well, Night Watchman, this is why I have you. This is the
problem with somebody who has in his day job, he has minions to figure out basic things like where the coffee maker is, and the coffee maker is over to the left. The thing with the pot brewing. Okay.
See, Night Watchman. So
yes, boss.
Aubrey, my brother, please do tell. So now, hey, how long have you been in that space that Bree was mentioning? And then 2, you being there in Harlem, what would you say the environment like is in Harlem? What would you say if you had to take a guesstimate are the numbers of Airbnbs that you may know out there?
So so I've been in the Airbnb space for over 8 years. I've lived in Harlem for over 25.
Wow, nice.
And and it has changed significantly over the years. You know, the Airbnb was one of those quiet secrets that were pretty much hidden in plain sight. So it would come up in conversation, but it was never really like discussed for a number of reasons. And but you could see it around you. And on my block in Harlem, I'd say there are over 10 Airbnbs on my block, and these are all
Wow.
from homeowners who finally found an opportunity to maximize the value of with the space that they have, just to I guess to complement the income that they have coming in. So it cuts a couple of different ways. I think when they put this local law 18 together, and they did it with such a broad stroke, and whoever crafted it, I don't think anyone went and read the fine print where who it was meant for, and then the unintended circumstances and unintended victims of this whole thing, which I think are 1 and 2 family homeowners.
Okay.
Because when you when you look at the egregious activity, you think about apartment buildings with 30 units, 40 units, and the developer or the sponsor is holding back 8 or 10 units to rent out to Airbnb as if it's a hotel, versus
Wow.
the homeowner, a 1 family or 2 family homeowner that's trying to just supplement their income, pay for an extra vacation here and there, or just to have a little extra money in the pocket. I think no one was with Airbnb, the 1 and 2 family, no one was getting rich as far as I know, and hanging up, you know, their work shoes and saying, "Listen, I'm there. Airbnb is going to carry me out to retirement." It was more of, "Hey, this is something one that I can use. I have the flexibility, so I can keep my personal belongings, and when family comes in, there's space for them, and I can rent it out in the meantime." Because a long-term renter. Another thing too, when there's all the talk about affordable housing, which is something it impacts the whole city and something that I care deeply about. And 1 and 2 family homeowners, that's not the stock of affordable housing, if you will. The stock of affordable housing is coming from buildings, big buildings,
Gotcha.
bigger buildings, like to say. 1 and 2 family homeowners aren't in the subsidized programs. They're not a part of rent control. They're not a part of affordable housing. They're at the discretion of the owner of the home. And while they are a source of housing, it's not a part of the affordable housing conversation. It never has in the past. And for some reason, we're swept into this conversation with this local law 18. And
Gotcha.
my last point, with RHOAR and the acronym and what it stands for, I think the bigger overarching issue is we're homeowners. We own our space, and we purchased our home because of that. We didn't purchase a co-op, right, where you have to go by the rules of the community. We're not in a homeowners association where you have to go through and share spaces. And we're not in a condo. Again, we have shared space. We have our own home. And when the law and legislators start dictating who we can have coming into our home and the terms where they can enter our homes, I think it's a dangerous territory that we're going in. I get the regulation for bigger buildings, and that's a community type of issue. But when you're talking about my personal space, right, my front door, right, and no shared space, like, I think there's an overreach there that hasn't been addressed, and I hope it does get addressed, and I hope it doesn't have to come through the courts. But I think there's an overreach that has to be addressed when someone is trying to tell me and dictate what I'm doing with my own personal property and dictating who I can have as guest and the terms on which I can have them as guest.
Gotcha. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's perfect. And you know, Bree,
let me get a
go ahead.
question
Yeah,
in here.
go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
Aubrey, when you were talking, I was thinking about Harlem and also understanding that one of the reasons why the opportunity was big in Harlem was because Harlem has a paucity of hotel space. So it made sense that if people wanted to stay in Harlem, they would look at the Airbnb alternative. And then I started to thinking about the fact that hotels are probably one of the biggest losers of the Airbnb phenomenon. So I wanted to ask both Bree and Aubrey. I don't know much about the history of this legislation, but was there some pushback in terms of the hotel lobby vying to get this thing in place? And I could see that if they were pushing this legislation, that they would want a broad brushstroke that didn't see any nuance in the small owners. So your thoughts on that?
Listen, I can't speculate on the lobbies that are behind this law, right? Although there are some clear beneficiaries to this law being passed, and the hotel being one of them. And so, yeah, it's unfortunate, and that's where when you ask politicians to come in and do their job is to just read what they're signing on to, right? When a lot of times they allow lobbyists to draw up the law and then they just submit it and then vote. And we're the constituents that cast the vote. And it's unfortunate when we have to go down this path. But there are a couple of different issues. One, there's the hotel, the lack of hotel space in Harlem and just outside of the center of Manhattan, right? Like leave center of Manhattan, and it's kind of tough to find a real hotel beyond that space. Now they're building one in Harlem now, for wherever that's going, right? In the Bronx, there's not a lot of options. Brooklyn, there are some downtown, but as you go further in, you don't have it. But I think with Airbnb, it allows families to visit and for them to stay intact and at a reasonable price. You know, when you start looking at bringing, a family, a set of grandparents, and then their adult children and their kids, when you start to get up into 6 adults or 6 people, 7 people, it becomes a challenge in a hotel, where you don't have, cooking, facilities, and you have, only one bathroom, right? And so it gets it gets a bit challenging for families to travel and afford the living in the city center. But I think it's a bigger issue too, where Airbnb has also introduced people from out of town to other parts of the city where they can explore and spend locally, which is what people have done. In our neighborhood, you see the tourists all the time, and they're out there, and they're spending in the local stores. They're going to the grocery store to get groceries. They're in the coffee shops. They're all over the neighborhood, and it's amazing and beautiful to see. And like no one's addressed that aspect of it. And they did a study of phone. They can track how many people are more than 5 miles of the distance they are from their home, and how in different places like Bed-Stuy and Harlem, the number has increased year over year on the number of phones that are in the area from more than 5, 10, 15 miles outside of their home base. And I think that's a direct result of Airbnb.
Nice. And Bree, same question. Tell us what you've observed there in the Bronx.
Well, the Bronx has a positive Airbnbs. Brooklyn actually is the epicenter of the biggest cluster of Airbnbs. They have the largest townhome population in the city, and as an outgrowth of that, they've been able to do more Airbnb with 1 and 2 family homes. But I want to sidetrack a bit And I want to say that Airbnb, let's make it very clear, is the largest player in the short-term rental space. I did not start my short-term rental journey with Airbnb. I started with HomeAway, breadandbreakfast.com, and most importantly, there was a company called Wimdu out of Germany that was the predecessor to Airbnb in this space. They were the behemoths in this space. And that's how I started. Airbnb now is being used as if someone were to say, let's make a Xerox as opposed to a copy. It is not the end all be all in this space. This is about short-term rentals, VRBO, HomeAway, or Airbnb, or a list of others. The issue that we're having is about short-term rentals. And historically, we've had places like Vail, Colorado, Aspen, Sag Harbor, Martha's Vineyard, okay? And you can keep going, you know, down the list of places where short-term rentals have historically, Hilton Head, South Carolina, have historically been done by the communities for decades. The individuals who moved and disrupted this space did so because there was a need for the middle class traveler to have an affordable space in areas where it was very unaffordable. And to do that, they were able to enlist hosts, ordinary people, in order to do this, make this transition, this disruption. So I just want to say that off the top. This is not about Airbnb. It's about short-term rentals. And if you look at what's going on, I don't want to start waxing too poetic because it's too poetic. Look at what's going on with New York State, where the governor wanted to create affordable housing outside of the cities and do that with affordable multi-level, multi-family homes in those spaces. And those neighborhoods of Long Island, Westchester, upstate New York said, no way, you're not doing it here. So now you got a powder keg where you've got homelessness, you've got a affordable housing crisis, you've got a migrant crisis. All of these things add up to short-term rental hosts being looked at as the villain, that we're keeping units off of the market that so desperately are needed. The government has been unable to move to create enough housing, so the housing that's available is precious.
Gotcha.
That is the space we find ourselves in right now. That we, the 1 and 2, and I'll just say something about the 2 family owners, their second unit, which they would like to use occasionally and keep maybe for a family member or for a respite, they are being told that that unit no longer belongs to them. It actually belongs to the government, and the government would like them to become landlords.
Wow. Wow. Well, Bree, one of the things that I definitely need you to clarify or give me the nuance there is that you sent me a text early. We said we had a person in Harlem, but you said that they should own a 1 to 2 family house. If they own a 3 to more family house, then they are in a whole different category with local law 18. So please expand on that and tell me about it.
They were just off the top of my head, they were considered unable, unless they were a Class B which designates that you're able, SRO, rooming house, hotel, stuff like that, designates that you're able to do short-term rentals. If you were a 3-family, 4-family, you were the state rule, you could not do it under 30 days, flat out.
Wow.
Okay, so their argument goes way beyond and before September 5th. September 5th codified that we're in the same boat, the 1 and 2 family homeowners. As a 1-family homeowner, I should be able to have applied and be accepted based on the criteria. I always did 2 persons. I didn't do families. I live in my home. I've got 4 guests, 2 from Germany, 2 from Sweden in my spaces right now. Okay.
Gotcha.
I'm fine. But when we get into 1 and 2 families, the city is saying, hey, unless you do it this way, that unit that you have has got to be 30 days and over. And hopefully you'll make it into at least 30 days, which in some areas of the country has been found to be unconstitutional. For example, Austin, Texas, they found that no, you cannot make a homeowner do this. It is unconstitutional in the state of Texas. So now let's put it to you this way. The reason why they said that was because, for example, here in New York, there are certain things that I have to do. 2 people, no locks, all of this stuff has to be done if I want to do it under 30 days. But if I did it over 30 days, all of those restrictions go away. Why? What's the difference?
Tell us. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's a matter of optics more than actual tactics to address this issue. What the politicians are forced to do, because they've got such a major crisis going on, is to at least look as if they are addressing this in every sector of housing.
Gotcha.
Right. We again are being brushed with a broad brush when it should be a scalpel. I'm not blaming the politicians. I'm not saying this is not a crisis. What I'm saying is there's a group of individuals who are doing it right that should not have to go through these hoops to continue to have additional income. And this income does not make you rich. It sets a floor for you. It is part of the ecosystem of maybe your finances. There are individuals who use Airbnb, and maybe that's 30, 40% of their real income. But if you take away 30 to 40% of your income, now you're in a deficit.
Yes.
That's for sure.
That's where a lot of us now are.
And you know what, Aubrey? Certainly, you had reference, of course, the hotel on 125th Street. It is indeed open, and that, of course, is the Marriott Renaissance brand. So now, with that said, do you anticipate that there will be a negative impact on what you do?
No, I mean, listen, with this local law 18, that's pretty much putting everybody out of business or severely handicapping them from doing anything in the space. But I guess they won't be able to blame short-term rentals on the success or failure of the hotel. I think hotels are used for other reasons. I think hotels are more geared for business. I think it's geared for the individual traveler, for a day or two, where I think Airbnb is more for the 4-day or 5-day stays, the long weekends with a group. I think it's more of that. And with just how they arbitrarily threw 1 and 2 family homeowners in there was a time and they're not discerning between the 1 and 2 family homeowners, the 3 and 4 family homeowners, and then the multi-unit big buildings, right? Where you have 40, 50 units. Like, how is that even possible? And there, in a lot of in legislation written for housing, there used to be the bucket of 1, 2, and 3 family homes were in a separate bucket from everyone else, right?
Gotcha.
And now they're just, and now they've split it out, and now they'll probably split it again, and it doesn't make any sense because no one's really paying attention to how these lines are being drawn, in my humble opinion. And I think this is where it starts to get a bit messy because people are fast and loose with the rules and how they're drawing it up. It really comes down, and I think Texas, Austin, and maybe the state constitution. And I think this probably goes higher than that, where you're taking away the right that my right to use my home, and I think anyone can argue that. And for a condo or co-op owner, what you do behind the door or whatever in your co-op, but you have to deal with the community because you're a part of. You share walls with everybody. You do those things, but a homeowner, whether I'm in Manhattan or whether I'm in the Bronx or Queens, why you should not tell me how I should use my home. I just don't think that's fair and just.
So tell me this. So Airbnb, because you mentioned you, Aubrey, you, Bree, in terms of being homeowners, right? So condo and co-op owners, let's say I have a three bedroom. Can I use under the current? Can I use one of the rooms because I'm still living there? Can I use one of them as an Airbnb based on the law?
So based on the law, it's similar to homeowners. Based on the law, yes, you can, as long as the homeowner is there, and there are other stipulations as far as in locks on the internal doors, and such. So they're under the same rules unless there's a restriction on that building and that building is thrown on a list. They're under the same rules. So me as a homeowner, I can't rent my space unless I'm there, and I can have no more than 2 guests.
Gotcha.
The condo and co-op owners that allow Airbnb in those buildings, because those buildings can also be on a list where they don't allow it at all, but that's the decision that the building makes, right? Then you don't have any option. But for those that don't restrict short-term rentals in their building, now you have to go and deal with the city rules, which are saying that you can't have more than 2 guests, and you can't have any internal locks on your doors, and the owner has to be in the unit when those guests are renting it. So it's not like you can rent it out and then, let's say you have let's say you're not there or you're on vacation. You can't. They're saying that you can't rent your house to someone while you're on vacation because you have to be there.
Wow. So literally, you cannot have some managing agent look at the property. Okay. Wow. So Bree, tell me your thoughts on that, man.
My thoughts on that are exactly right. Aubrey is making a valid point that you have to be on a list for that building. And if your building is in an area and designated viable, if the landlord of that building says, I don't really care, I don't want it here, that's the end of it.
Wow.
Because they're the owner.
Yes.
That's right. That's
which is ironic and hypocritical, because if I'm the owner and it's my house, my home, whichever way we want to describe me as being an owner, I should have the right. Now let's take a look at something that happened recently outside of short-term rentals. Do you remember a few months ago that the Supreme Court came down and New York State had a law that was over 100 years old about concealed carry? Anybody remember that?
I do.
Supreme Court came down and said, what are you doing? That's that individual constitutional right to carry concealed, and we will strike down your law.
Wow.
My point is that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. What's wrong and what's right depends on the mood of the day, time of the day. There's been an evolution in Detroit from strict to more liberal. There's been an evolution in Philly from strict to more liberal. I think they get it right. There's been an evolution in Austin that we've seen. I am hoping that in New York, where there is a migrant crisis, where there is a homeless crisis, where there's an affordable housing crisis, that we can evolve, that we can, over time, and looking at this closer, find a happy medium for those of us that have been doing it the right way. That is what I see going forward. Now, when you talked about the hotel lobby, it's not necessarily just the hotel lobby. They have an interest in making sure that they get for their employees and their ownership groups the best scenario for their business model. Many times, the short-term rental space has infringed on that. Now, as far as housing space and rental space, let's say hotel space included, short-term rentals make up less than 1% of the rooms and homes of this city. But just that 1% or a little bit less is still a danger to certain groups. And I'll say this again, this is a real problem in New York. Housing is a problem. Affordable housing, homelessness, migrant, these are problems that politicians have to weigh and see how they can solve it. And as a democratic and progressive city, the people that vote in bulk are the poorest and most set upon people of this city. If you're a politician, are you going to go with a fringe middle class group of homeowners that don't really have the votes or the power to impact you at the ballot box? Are you going to go against the business interests who have legitimate business interests and who have employees that also live in and vote for you? It's a hard task to say that those politicians are able to see this in its nascent form. But when it evolves and more people understand that they are good New Yorkers doing this legally, I think we will be able, the people at RHOAR, restoring homeowners autonomy and respect, those of us that work in this space to get ourselves noticed and understood, we will then, in the long term, with these politicians, with these business interests, find a happy medium. That is my hope, and that's what I think will happen.
Gotcha.
Bree, I've got two questions for you. One, has anyone done any kind of estimate on the economic impact of this new law? In terms of total revenues lost from the short-term rental owners that were affected. And my second question is whether RHOAR is pursuing any legal options.
As far as studies, there are several competing groups. Airbnb is the giant in the space, and they've had their legal team, their lobbying teams trying to get a happy medium here. So there has been a lawsuit. Airbnb lost the lawsuit against the city in the state Supreme Court, appellate court. And because of that, that's why we are where we are today. As far as what RHOAR is doing, restoring homeowners' autonomy and respect, RHOAR is trying not to go the route of suing the city. RHOAR is trying to, as I mentioned, work within the confines of negotiation and education. We're trying to tell the city that there are 1 and 2 family homeowners that should be exempt, that should be given the benefit of the doubt because we've been doing this legally. We've been doing it the right way. These are our homes, and those of us that are in RHOAR are not trying to battle the city.
Gotcha.
We are trying to work to clarify our position with the city. And we understand that these are real problems that these politicians and the city government is dealing with. We're just trying to say that we're just really not the problem here.
Right.
We're more of a solution to a space than a problem to the space that they have to deal with. That's what we're trying to do.
And you know, to Bree's point, we all hope that this evolves. And if you think back to the yellow cab and the black car scenarios before we got the green cabs, right? So you know, it was kind of an unspoken rule: if you were in certain areas, no one was going to interfere or enforce a street pickup from a car that did not have a medallion, right?
Correct.
And so that was kind of there were the rules that were on the books and how they were enforced. And then when there was more push, they created the green cabs, you know, that don't operate. They have boundaries within they operate, right? And I think, you know, there may be some type of solution. You know, we have the city center and then we have the rest of the city. I don't know what that happy medium is, but you know, I think about the whole taxi situation, and before green cabs, if you thought about it, whether if you were in Brooklyn, if you were above 96th Street in Manhattan, if you were in the Bronx, you pretty much you had to rely on car services without medallions, and because they weren't increasing the number of medallions and they weren't pushing them to come uptown, and we have the same situation with hotels. Hotels aren't really rushing to build uptown in Harlem or the Bronx or deep in Brooklyn, and no one's providing any type of solution or any type of solution for the situation. And it's something that we need to start looking more creatively, and hopefully we get some politicians in there that want to do more than just rubber stamp what the lobbyists are putting in front of them, and we come up with some real solutions that work for the city, for the homeowners, you know, and for the industries that we need to partner with.
Absolutely. One of the things, certainly, I remember seeing a headline, and that, of course, you know, hotel, anti-AirBNB regs kill the little guy. So tell me, would you think that things have sped up because of COVID or the lockdown, that has exposed, let's say, as you say, Bree, the real need for affordable housing, and then using Airbnb or you guys as scapegoats on this?
Well, we've been caught up in this with a broad brush. Scapegoats, that's for people in the media that have, you know, clicks to get and eyeballs to get. I don't think that the politicians of New York City are using us as scapegoats. I think they see us as a fraction of a solution to a very large problem. And when you're looking at hotels, since September 5th, from what we've been able to ascertain, hotel rates have gone up something like 16 to 20%. Could that be because they're settling for the new season, holiday season? Or could it be that this is an opportunity that this day has come? We don't know. What we can say is that logically, because of COVID, now take a look at this at a different angle. Because of COVID, we've seen a tremendous amount of exodus from the Midtown area.
Yes.
We don't have the office workers that we did before to fuel the engine, the economic engine that is Midtown Manhattan. It's still vibrant, but nowhere near at the capacity it was before COVID. If you have individuals who are able to get affordable rental space for their families outside of the main Midtown area, it takes away from those hotel rooms, from those individuals who would then be able to use the services of Midtown, the employees that would be able to come back to work and to get that engine going. So while we're not a major problem, we are a fraction of a problem that they're trying to get a hold of and get Midtown, get New York City office space rolling again. At one point, I'm just going to say it's something off the wall. At one point, Hudson Yards was seen as a major white elephant because they couldn't generate the income with the office space.
Yeah. True.
It took time for Hudson Yards, and recently Hudson Yards has been seen to be an engine now. But it took years for them to solve that problem, including going through COVID. So when the problem of space in Midtown, when the problem of hotels feeling that they're not getting their fair share, when that goes to a little bit more manageable space, I think we'll be less of a threat. I don't think we're scapegoated, but we are something that they need to get in order.
Gotcha. You know what? I guess one of the things I was also thinking about, can I interchange, let's say, a bed and breakfast with Airbnb, or they totally separate? Someone weigh in. Are they totally separate? And the reason being, I just want to say, and Aubrey, you mentioned this, in terms of being an economic generator, we get that. So for the local area, have you had relationships with, let's say, a number of the restaurants or other businesses, small businesses in the Harlem community that could benefit from, let's say, guests coming to the community and spending money, so to speak?
Oh, absolutely. You know, we have a huge Starbucks, and then we have like a small local coffee shop around the corner. And I've talked to that local owner, and we've had conversations, and guests have gone there, and I've shared it with, you know, the other homeowners on my block, and that the owner of that coffee shop is just so grateful because they're just getting a steady flow of people who drink a lot of coffee and who are coming in, and they can find a comfortable space in the coffee shop. So I've done that. They've given them discounts if they mention my name, and that's happened. There's the sandwich shop on the right around the corner as well, that also has done a bang up business with people coming in from out of town. And then the grocery store a few blocks away, they love it. You know, they see the rush of out of towners coming in who don't speak English, who are speaking, you know, all different types of languages coming into their store. And I talked to the owner of the grocery store, and he has seen the impact of his business, you know, as they're buying, you know, high ticket items, you know, and convenience items that otherwise would move a lot slower. So there is definitely an impact, because people tend to like stay in the area for the most part, unless they're going out to visit sites. So they're hitting the local restaurants, they're visiting the local churches, going to those services on Sunday. I've had several ask about that. There's just a whole, it's an ecosystem, like Bree said, that runs from beginning to end, where people are just participating and generating income and opportunities for the communities that otherwise wouldn't be getting that from outsiders.
And then Bree, in terms of, let's say, the BX, same thing, it generated with your business in the surrounding community?
Without question. The guests that come here come from all around the world.
Nice.
Australia, Europe, Africa, every continent except Antarctica. And they probably had somebody who was doing a research study that came down here for a break. So what I'm saying is that, yes. Do we want to hang our hat on that, though? Because from what I'm really being blunt today. As a politician, and these other media types that see it so simply, I've seen national media types equate what we're doing is not a real job, and go get a real job and do something. There's animosity towards this group, no matter how much good we can declare that we do. And for us, when we start to justify ourselves, there's a million other ways where they're saying, hey, there's some homeless people that don't have a home. So your ability to get the coffee shop, 7 more cups of coffee in the morning does not in any way placate the fact that people are homeless and people don't have affordable housing. So I tend not to really get too deep into what we're adding to the local economies, though it is true. What I like to get into is what we're doing for the goodwill of the city. What we're doing is legal. We are not criminals. What we're doing is something that is not going to hurt the city's homeless, migrant, hotel community. We are a speck in the ointment of the city economy. We're not disrupting anything. There have been bad actors with this law. Hopefully those bad actors will dissipate and move on. We live here. We don't invest here. We don't try to take advantage here. We try to live here, try to subsist here, try to be good citizens and good neighbors here. That's what I want the powers that be in the city to understand. We are not a threat. We're not trying to declare, that we're doing more than we're doing for the economy. We're just getting by.
Gotcha. And then what? Go ahead, Aubrey. Go ahead.
And just to add to Bree's point, and I agree with him. I think the city, in trying to correct some of the things that were being done by the bad actors, they're doing things right, and there's doing the right thing. And the right thing was not to include 1 and 2 family homeowners into this group. That was not the right thing to do. The right thing was to doing things right and addressing the issue, absolutely, because there were some bad actors out there and they were affecting the housing stock, but it wasn't 1 and 2 family homeowners. And I think that's the part where just things weren't done. That's not the right thing to do. And to separate out 1 and 2 family homeowners from the rest of the apartment complex, the apartment complex population, and separate out those 1 and 2 family homeowners to be what they are, 1 and 2 family homeowners, that live in their space, that rent out and make a little extra money on the side by hosting.
Gotcha. And NightWatchman, I see that you wanted to say something. Go ahead.
No, just listening. I mean, it's such a complicated issue. And some of the problems I see are that these restrictions are codified in the law, and those are things that I think may have to be addressed at the legal level. And that's obviously the whole process of getting the right legislators to go back and take a look at it and add some sort of modification to it. So I'm just wondering, what the path is for you guys from here to actually get where you want to go with this.
Yeah, the registration process is onerous, to say the least. And then they don't have the staffing to get it done, and then there's the whole enforcement side. I think kind of like with the black car situation in some of the lesser served parts of the city, it's an enforcement issue. People don't get tickets for spitting on the street or throwing their gum on the ground or cigarette butts, right? But it's the law. You can get a summons for that. And that's the same with Airbnb and 1 and 2 family homeowners. There's a level of enforcement that they have to decide that they're going to go forward with. And they've just taken an approach with that broad stroke to just wipe everybody out. And this is life-changing for 1 and 2 family homeowners. For the large landlords, their premise was built on the fact that they would rent out those apartments. So that's just gravy for them. But for the 1 and 2 family homeowners, this is life changing. And
Now
many
you
people
had
have
mentioned that
serious about staying in the city.
you had mentioned that you have Airbnb basically cut you off if you didn't have the certificate, and you guys are stuck in that log jam. Is that the same for the other Verbo and Home Away? Are they all
Yes.
the same place? Yeah. So
Yeah,
this
Airbnb is just the big guy in the room, so that's why everyone references Airbnb. But it's all of those short-term rental sites. So VRBO, Home Away, and so if you're listing a house or a place in New York, then you're subject to those rules. And at some point, New York City's going to tap into it, and those sites are required to give information of all of the people who are registered. So now the city gets to see who's taking reservations and who has reservations, and what can be done. And they're finding sites.
So your immediate problem is the log jam that's happening in terms of actually responding to the registrations that are already in, correct?
Bree would probably say that. I would say the immediate issue is the fact that they use this broad brush and they're enforcing it. And I would love for them to like stop the enforcement, get through the registrations, and then have the conversation about what to do next. Instead, they've suspended all activity, and they can't get the registrations done, which is kind of backwards. It's like, hey, we've got a manpower problem. Let's allow this to continue on and not enforce until we get our house in order, that we can actually process applications or something to give some relief to the homeowners who have to go through a process that they're requiring us to go through. But listen, I want to be in the process, and I submit my application. And now, because they can't get to my application, I'm stuck. I don't have any income coming from my home, and I can't do a thing. But not because I don't have an available house, but because they can't process. That's a problem.
Bree, what say you?
I want to cover 2 points. I don't know how much time we have.
Go ahead.
Short, so be brief.
Okay. I don't know if I could be brief. I'm going to try.
Okay.
The issue that's going on now with the registration is one in which it's like molasses. And we're put in a spot. But again, I don't want to focus on us as woe is me. Look at the cannabis industry, which you've covered. That industry, the good actors in that industry are still waiting. The farmers are still waiting. The dispensaries are still waiting in large numbers. All of these individuals that had been caught up in the legal system and were supposed to get first choice, a lot of them are still waiting, going broke, still waiting. But on every corner of New York City, we now have a weed establishment that is illegal. There's a black market in the face of our city government that is thriving. Those individuals I feel for. We now are an example of that kind of bureaucracy. I'm hoping we don't end up like cannabis, because they've been waiting years. I'm hoping we can resolve this in a few months. And even that, going into the holidays, is a tough thing to say.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, so now my last point.
Go ahead.
RHOAR, restoring homeowners autonomy and respect, is a group that started out as 1 and 2 family homeowners addressing local law 18. I see it growing. I see it becoming a political force in this city. We already are trying to talk to our politicians. We all have been tasked to speak to our council person. We've talked to the mayor, but we're not big enough yet for there to be something that we can immediately say can get done. But we are drinking our milk and we are eating our spinach. And right now we're looking at citywide elections where a group of 1,000 or 2 can make a difference. And that's what I think our goal is, to be more politically active in the long run, not with just 1 and 2 family homeowners, 3 and 4, condo and co-op. Bring them all underneath this because they're all homeowners. So that's what I wanted to say. And please check us out on our social media, which is flaring in front of the screen as you're seeing it. Check us out. See what we're getting into. If you think you can be part of this, even if you're not 1 and 2 family, if you're 3 and 4 condo co-op, get in touch with us. Join us. Let's really let them know that we can roar.
Very good, very good. And Aubrey, some closing thoughts. Tell us. You were giving us a tour of your Airbnb. Go ahead, give us some closing thoughts.
I'd like to say the autonomy is the big part of it. Being a homeowner and making this purchase, I'd like to be able to do what I want to do with my home, as I please, and that's why I purchased a home versus a condo or a co-op. So I think there's an overstretch, and I think too there's a level of compassion that politicians can show to the homeowners, and not use a broad stroke to include us in legislation that's really set up for large buildings, and be more thoughtful about how these things are being applied across the board. And I think that's something that we can get some more of in the city council and across the board, is just some more thoughtfulness on how some of this legislation is being crafted at the end of the day.
Excellent. NightWatchman, take us home, buddy.
You've been listening to Soul Lounge Primetime on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. You can always find us on Monday nights, 7 p.m. on the radio, 8 o'clock live streaming on social media. And you can find us on your favorite social media podcast platforms, including iTunes, Amazon Music, iHeart Music, Spotify. Ask Alexa, ask Siri, ask anybody. You can find the latest show, Soul Lounge Primetime. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your insight and experience on this. And this is an issue that we have to keep our eye on.
Exactly. They'll be back. You know this.
They'll be back. So
absolutely.
Check us out next week. We got a great show coming up. We don't even know what it is yet. That's how good it is.
Gentlemen, thank you so much.